I, 28, female, stood beside my new husband, Liam, 30, male, and the world felt perfect. The soft lights of the reception hall glowed around us. The scent of roses and champagne hung in the air. Liam's hand was warm and steady in mine. After months of stressful planning, this was our moment. This was the reward. Friends and family filled the room, their faces beaming. Every smile felt like a blessing. Every clink of a glass felt like a tiny bell ringing just for us. I leaned my head against his shoulder for a moment, soaking it all in. This was the first day of the rest of our lives. I truly believed that. I felt a deep, settled peace in my chest, a feeling that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My sister Clara tapped her fork against her champagne flute. The gentle chiming cut through the happy chatter, and a hush fell over the room. As my maid of honor, it was her turn to give a toast. I squeezed Liam's hand, a little nervous, but mostly excited. Clara and I had a complicated history. She was my older sister, and she had always cast a long shadow. She was the popular one, the witty one, the one our parents always seemed to praise a little more loudly. I was the quiet one, the studious one. We loved each other, I thought, but there was always a current of competition running beneath the surface, mostly from her side. I had hoped my wedding would be a turning point for us, a moment where we could finally just be sisters, happy for each other without any rivalry. She stood up, a vision in her pale blue dress. She looked beautiful, and for a second, my heart swelled with pride. She raised her glass, a practiced smile on her face. To Ilara and Liam, she began, her voice smooth and confident. I've known Ilara my whole life, obviously. I've seen her through scraped knees and bad haircuts and questionable fashion choices in high school. A few people chuckled politely. I smiled, feeling the familiar warmth of shared history. This was nice. This was the speech I had hoped for. I've watched her grow up, Clara continued, her eyes scanning the crowd before landing on me. And I've watched her learn what she wants out of life. She's always been very determined. When she sets her mind on something, she goes for it with everything she has. Her tone shifted slightly, just enough for me to notice. A little edge had crept in. I felt a tiny knot of unease form in my stomach. Liam's hand tightened on mine, a silent signal of support. He knew about the friction between Clara and me. He had always told me not to worry about it, that she would come around. And when she met Liam, Clara said, turning her smile toward him, it was clear she had set her sights on something new, something grand. The room was quiet now. The polite chuckles had faded. People were listening intently, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. My own smile felt frozen on my face. What was she doing? This was my wedding day. She wouldn't. She couldn't. Some people might look at this beautiful wedding, at this wonderful, successful man, she gestured vaguely at Liam and the elegant ballroom, and they might think certain things. They might wonder how my quiet little sister managed all this. Her voice dripped with false sweetness, a poison I knew all too well. I could feel the blood draining from my face. My mother was staring at her, a look of mild confusion on her face. My father was frowning. Clara took a small sip of her champagne, letting the silence hang in the air for a dramatic beat. Then she looked directly at me, her smile widening into something sharp and cruel. But I know the truth. I know my sister. It's not about love or companionship. It's about ambition. She paused again, letting the words sink in. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, filled with confusion and dawning pity. Then came the final blow. She raised her glass higher, her voice ringing out with chilling clarity. She's a gold digger, obviously, so let's raise a glass to her. She finally got what she was digging for. To Ilara. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a thick, heavy thing, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. The words echoed in my head. Gold digger, obviously, my own sister. In front of everyone I had ever known or cared about. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that washed over me from head to toe. I felt small, exposed, and utterly powerless. My perfect day, Our perfect moment was shattered into a million tiny pieces. I turned to Liam, my eyes pleading with him. I needed him to stand up. I needed him to defend me, to shut her down, to tell everyone she was wrong. I needed my husband. But Liam didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, his hand still holding mine. But his body had gone rigid. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He was frozen. He wasn't looking at Clara, and he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at a fixed point in the distance, his expression a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. But it wasn't the shock of a man whose wife had just been insulted. It was something else. It was the shock of someone who had just seen a carefully laid plan go horribly, publicly wrong. And in that horrifying, silent moment, I knew. I knew this was not just my sister's cruelty. This was something much, much worse. The silence finally broke as someone coughed uncomfortably. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My mother stood up, her face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Clara, that's enough," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Sit down right now." Clara, looking immensely pleased with herself, just shrugged and took another delicate sip of her champagne before slowly sinking back into her chair. She avoided my gaze, but the triumphant smirk on her face was impossible to miss. She had done it. She had detonated a bomb in the middle of my life, and she was enjoying the fallout. I pulled my hand from Liam's. His skin was cold and clammy. "Liam," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "say something." He finally blinked, his focus slowly returning to the room. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a panic I didn't understand. "Alara, I'm so sorry," he stammered. "I don't know why she would say that. She's just being awful." His words were what a husband should say, but his tone was all wrong. It was hollow. There was no fire, no righteous anger on my behalf. There was only fear. That was the most confusing part. Why was he afraid? My best friend and bridesmaid, Maya, rushed to my side. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her arm wrapping around my shoulders. I shook my head, unable to form words. I felt dizzy, like the whole room was tilting on its axis. The happy faces of our guests now looked like a jury, all staring, all judging. The beautiful decorations suddenly seemed garish and mocking. Liam's father, Robert, a stern but generally fair man, stood up. He was a man who commanded respect, and the room quieted again when he spoke. "I think that concludes the toasts for the evening," he said, his voice firm and laced with disapproval. He shot a look at Clara that could have frozen water. "On behalf of our family, I want to apologize for that unfortunate display. Alara, we are so happy to welcome you into our family. Please, everyone, enjoy the rest of the evening." It was a masterful piece of damage control, but the damage was already done. The music started up again, a little too loud, a little too cheerful. A few brave couples moved to the dance floor, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. But the atmosphere was ruined. Small groups of people were huddled together, whispering and casting furtive glances our way. The party was over, even if the music was still playing. "I need some air," I said, my voice tight. I turned and walked away from the head table, away from Liam's panicked face and Clara's smug one. I pushed through the doors leading to the venue's garden, the cool night air a welcome shock to my heated skin. Maya followed me out, her hand a comforting presence on my back. "I am going to kill her," Maya said, her voice seething with a rage that I was too numb to feel myself. "I swear, Ilara, I am going to ruin her. How could she do that to you?" "On your wedding day." I leaned against the stone balustrade, taking deep, shuddering breaths. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't understand." But that wasn't entirely true. I understood Clara's jealousy. I had lived with it my whole life. What I didn't understand was Liam, his reaction, that frozen, deer-in-the-headlights terror. It played over and over in my mind. He should have been angry. He should have been furious. He should have stood up and defended his new wife without a second's hesitation. But he hadn't. He had frozen. It was the reaction of a man who was not surprised by the accusation, but by the timing of it. Like he knew the bullet was in the gun, he just didn't expect it to be fired right then. "It's Liam," I said, more to myself than to Maya. "What about him?" she asked, her voice softening. He looked shocked too, Alara. He was probably just as blindsided as you were. No, I said, shaking my head. It was a different kind of shock. It wasn't for me. It was for himself. I looked at her, my eyes pleading for her to understand. He knew. Maybe he didn't know she was going to say it in a toast, but he knew this was coming. He knew they thought this about me. Maya frowned. What are you talking about? Liam adores you. He wouldn't let anyone, not even your sister, talk about you like that. Wouldn't he? I asked, the numbness beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He's always been so passive when it comes to his family. His mother doesn't like me, I know that. She's always been polite to my face, but it's a cold politeness. And Clara has been spending a lot of time with her lately. The pieces started to click into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Clara's sudden closeness with Liam's mother, Beatrice. Beatrice's thinly veiled disapproval of me, of my middle-class background, of my career that she deemed unsuitable for the wife of her son. Liam's constant reassurances that everything was fine, that his mother just needed time to get to know me. The garden door opened, and Liam stepped out. He looked haggard, his tie loosened, his hair slightly disheveled. Alara, he said, his voice strained. Can we talk? Maya gave me a questioning look. I nodded, and she squeezed my arm before heading back inside, giving us privacy. What do you want to talk about, Liam? I asked, my voice flat. I didn't turn to look at him. I just kept my eyes fixed on the darkened garden. I am so sorry, he said, moving to stand beside me. What Clara did was unforgivable. I've already told her she needs to leave. You told her to leave? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. A little late for that, don't you think? The damage is done. Everyone in that room now thinks your wife married you for your money. That's not true, he insisted. No one who knows you would ever believe that. You're the most independent person I know. You have your own career, your own money. It's absurd. Then why did you just stand there? I finally turned to face him, my voice rising. Why did you freeze? You looked terrified, Liam. Not angry. Terrified. Why? He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my eyes. I was shocked, Alara. I couldn't believe she was doing that. I didn't know what to say. That's a lie, I said, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. You are never at a loss for words. You're a lawyer, for God's sake. You argue for a living. But you stood there like a statue, while my own sister called me a whore in front of 200 people. Don't say that, he said, wincing. She didn't call you that. She might as well have, I shot back. Now tell me the truth. Why did you freeze? He sighed, a long, weary sound. It's complicated, Alara. Uncomplicate it, I demanded, right now, or this marriage, all 1 hour of it, is over. The words came out before I even had a chance to think about them, but as soon as they were spoken, I knew I meant them. He finally met my gaze, and what I saw in his eyes confirmed my worst fears. It wasn't just panic anymore. It was guilt. My mother, he said, his voice barely audible. She and Clara have been talking. I know that, I said, crossing my arms. I'm not an idiot. What have they been talking about? My mother has concerns, he said, choosing his words carefully, about our finances, about protecting the family assets. She thinks you might not have the family's best interests at heart. The cold dread in my stomach turned into a block of ice. Protecting the family assets? You mean protecting them from me? Your wife. She doesn't know you like I do, he said quickly. She's just being overly cautious. She's from an older generation. She thinks about these things. Inheritance, legacy. So she and my sister, the maid of honor I chose, the person who was supposed to be standing up for me, have been plotting behind my back, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. And you knew about it? You knew they were planning something. I didn't know this, he insisted, gesturing vaguely back toward the reception hall. I had no idea they would do something so public, so cruel. I thought my mother was just venting her anxieties to Clara. I told her to back off. I told her she was wrong about you. But you didn't tell me, I said, the final damning piece clicking into place. You knew your mother and my sister were conspiring against me, painting me as some kind of predator, and you didn't think that was something your future wife should know. You just let me walk into this ambush completely blind. I didn't want to worry you, he said, his voice pleading. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could make my mother see reason. I was trying to protect you from the drama. Protect me? I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You didn't protect me, Liam. You served me up on a platter. Your silence was your consent. Your inaction was your approval. You stood there and let them do it. I looked at his face, at the man I had promised to love and trust just hours before, and I felt nothing. The love, the warmth, the sense of peace. It was all gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I was alone in this. I had been alone in it for months, and I just hadn't realized it. I'm going home, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. To my apartment. Not our house. Ilara, no, please, he begged, reaching for my hand. It's our wedding night. We can fix this. We can talk this through. I pulled my hand away. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice when you chose to keep their secrets instead of standing with me. You chose them, your mother, my sister. You chose them over your wife. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the garden. I walked back through the reception hall, my head held high, ignoring the whispers and the stares. I found Maya, who took one look at my face and knew. Let's go, she said, grabbing our purses. As we walked out of the venue, I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the wreckage of my perfect day. I didn't want to see the man who would let it all happen. All I wanted was to get away. The drive back to my old apartment was silent. Maya knew I didn't want to talk, and I was grateful for it. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and a profound, bone-deep sadness. The wedding dress felt like a costume. The diamond ring on my finger felt heavy and foreign. When we got to my apartment, the place I had been so eager to leave behind for my new life with Liam, it felt like a sanctuary. It was mine, untouched by him, by his family, by the disaster that my wedding had become. Do you want me to stay? Maya asked gently as I unlocked the door. I shook my head. I think I need to be alone for a bit, but thank you for everything. Call me if you need anything, she said, giving me a fierce hug. Anything at all. And Ilara, don't you dare blame yourself for any of this. This is on them, all of them. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. After she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, finally letting the tears fall. I cried for the beautiful wedding that had turned into a public shaming. I cried for the sister I thought I had, and the one I now knew I'd lost forever. But most of all, I cried for the husband who had failed me at the first and most important test. After the tears subsided, a different feeling began to take root. A cold, quiet anger. Maya was right. This was not my fault. I had done nothing wrong. I had fallen in love with a man, and his family's wealth was an incidental fact, not a motivation. I had a career I was proud of, a life I had built for myself. I didn't need their money. The accusation was not just a lie. It was an insult to everything I was. And they had done it so publicly, so deliberately. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to isolate me and put me in my place. Clara, out of petty jealousy. Beatrice, out of a cold, calculating desire to control her son and his fortune. And Liam, out of weakness, had let them. He had stood by and watched it happen. My phone started buzzing incessantly, a stream of texts from Liam. Ilara, please answer. I'm so sorry. I love you. We can fix this. Don't throw us away. I'm coming over. I turned the phone off and threw it on the couch. I wasn't ready to talk to him. I didn't know if I ever would be. Right now, talking was useless. What I needed were answers. Not his excuses, but the real, unvarnished truth. I needed to know exactly what they had been planning, how long it had been going on, and what their ultimate goal was. I stripped off the expensive lace wedding gown, leaving it in a heap on the floor. I put on an old pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. I felt more like myself in my old, comfortable clothes than I had all day in that princess dress. I made a cup of tea, the familiar ritual calming my frayed nerves. As I sat at my small kitchen table, the anger began to sharpen, to focus. It transformed from a wild, chaotic emotion into something cold and clear. It turned into resolve. They thought I was a quiet, unassuming girl they could push around. They thought they could shame me into submission. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They were about to find out how wrong they were. This wasn't just about clearing my name. This was about taking back my power. They had started a war at my wedding reception. I was going to finish it. The first step was to understand the battlefield. I needed information. I turned my phone back on, ignoring the barrage of messages from Liam and a few half-hearted, guilt-ridden texts from my mother telling me that Clara didn't mean it. I went straight to my social media accounts. Clara had always been a prolific oversharer. Her profiles were a carefully curated highlight reel of her life. I started scrolling back, months and months, looking for clues. I found a photo from 3 months ago. Clara and Beatrice, Liam's mother, having lunch at an expensive restaurant. The caption was gushing. "Such a wonderful afternoon with the most elegant woman I know, my future sister-in-law's mother. Beatrice. So much wisdom and grace. Feeling blessed." At the time, I had thought it was a bit strange. Clara had only met Beatrice a handful of times and had never shown much interest in her. Now the photo looked sinister. This was the beginning of their alliance. I kept digging. There were more photos, more check-ins, lunches, shopping trips, charity events. Clara was systematically ingratiating herself with Beatrice, becoming her confidant. My own sister was building a relationship with my future mother-in-law, a relationship that clearly excluded me. They were bonding over their shared subject, me. Then I found something else, a comment on one of Beatrice's posts from a woman I didn't recognize. The comment was innocuous enough. "So glad you have someone sensible like Clara to talk to about the upcoming, merger?" Merger. What an odd way to describe a wedding. It sounded so corporate, so transactional. I clicked on the woman's profile. It was private, but her bio listed her as a family law specialist, a divorce lawyer. A chill went down my spine. Why would a divorce lawyer be commenting on Beatrice's social media about my wedding? It made no sense, unless they weren't planning for a marriage. They were planning for a divorce. My divorce. The thought was so audacious, so monstrous, that I almost dismissed it. But it fit. It explained everything. The gold digger narrative wasn't just a random insult. It was a preemptive strike. They were laying the groundwork to paint me as a villain in a future divorce proceeding, to ensure I would walk away with nothing and a ruined reputation. They weren't just trying to humiliate me. They were trying to legally and financially neuter me before the marriage had even truly begun. And Liam? My sweet, loving Liam. Where did he fit into this? Was he an active participant? Or just a pawn? Too weak to stand up to his formidable mother? His frozen reaction at the wedding suddenly made perfect sense. He knew about the narrative. He knew about the concerns. He had probably sat through countless conversations where his mother and my sister dissected my character and motives. The toast wasn't a surprise attack on me. It was the public launch of their campaign, and he was the terrified bystander watching the first shot being fired. I felt a surge of fury so intense, it made me dizzy. This was premeditated. This was a conspiracy. And my own husband had known. He had stood by my side at the altar and made vows to me, knowing that his mother was consulting with divorce lawyers and my sister was preparing to assassinate my character. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Robert, Liam's father. I am deeply sorry for what happened tonight. My wife's behavior and your sister's was beyond reprehensible. Please call me when you are able. I believe there are things you need to know." Robert. He had always seemed like the reasonable one, often overshadowed by his overbearing wife. His message was a potential lifeline, a crack in the wall of the conspiracy. I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't just call him and start screaming. I needed a plan. I needed leverage. I spent the next few hours in a caffeine-fueled haze, mapping everything out on a notepad. The players, Clara, Beatrice, Liam, and now Robert as a potential ally. The motive, control over the family fortune, and, by extension, Liam. The strategy, discredit me, isolate me, and control the narrative from the very beginning. The goal, ensure that if the marriage failed, as they clearly expected it to, I would be left with nothing. My own goal was simpler: justice and exposure. I didn't want their money, I wanted them to be seen for what they were. I wanted everyone who had witnessed my humiliation to witness their downfall. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer, but a litigator, a friend of a friend known for being sharp and aggressive. I explained the situation in cold, clear terms: the public slander at the wedding, the evidence of a coordinated campaign, the potential involvement of my husband. This is defamation. Clear and simple, she said after I finished. Public humiliation with malicious intent, but a lawsuit is messy and public. Before we go that route, let's see what leverage we can gather. You need undeniable proof that this was a coordinated plan. Emails, texts, recordings, anything that shows intent. Her words solidified my resolve. I needed to get inside their conspiracy, and I knew exactly where to start. Liam and I had a shared cloud account for wedding planning. Photos, vendor contracts, spreadsheets. He was notoriously careless with his digital life, often syncing his personal devices to the shared account without thinking. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. I took a deep breath and logged in. The folders were all neatly organized. Venue, caterer, guest list. But there was one folder that didn't belong. It was titled Family Matters. My heart started to pound. This was it. I clicked on it. The folder was password protected. Of course it was. I tried the obvious passwords. Our anniversary, his birthday, his dog's name. Nothing worked. I felt a surge of frustration. I was so close. I sat back, trying to think. What would Liam, my sweet, predictable, mother-obsessed Liam, use as a password for a folder containing secrets about his family? And then it hit me. It was so simple, so obvious, so deeply pathetic. I typed in his mother's maiden name. Access granted. The folder opened, and my blood ran cold. It was all there. Dozens of files, scans of my financial records, my student loan statements, my credit report. They had been digging into my life for months. There were email chains between Beatrice and Clara. The subject line of one was, "Our Alara problem." I clicked on it and started to read. The emails were chilling. Beatrice was the strategist, cold and calculating. Clara was the eager foot soldier, feeding her bits of gossip and twisted versions of my past. They discussed my career, dismissing it as a little hobby. They talked about my friends, labeling them as opportunists. They twisted every independent decision I had ever made into evidence of my manipulative nature. She insists on keeping her own apartment, even after the wedding, Beatrice wrote in one email. She claims it's for financial independence, but it's clearly a bolt hole for when she makes her move. We need to be prepared. Clara's reply was even more venomous. "You're so right, Beatrice. She's always been like this. Secretive, always thinking she's better than the rest of us. I once overheard her telling a friend she would never be financially dependent on a man. It's all an act. She's playing the long game." Reading my sister's words felt like a physical blow. The betrayal was so profound it left me breathless. This wasn't just jealousy. This was a deep-seated hatred I had never known existed, but the worst was yet to come. I found another folder inside Family Matters. This one was labeled Contingency. Inside was a single audio file. My hand was trembling as I clicked play. It was a recording of a phone call. I recognized the voices immediately. It was Beatrice and a man with a gravelly voice, a private investigator. "So, you found nothing," Beatrice said, her voice sharp with impatience. "No secret debts? No disgruntled ex-boyfriends? Nothing. The girl's clean, Mrs. Davenport," the PI replied. "Her financials are solid. Paid off her student loans early. Good credit score." No skeletons in her closet that I can find. The men she's dated are all respectable. No drama. There was a long pause. Then Beatrice spoke again, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial tone. Well, if you can't find anything, then you'll just have to create something. I need leverage. Something to make her sign the post-nuptial agreement without a fuss. A doctored bank statement showing a large transfer to an offshore account, a photograph with an old male friend that looks compromising. I don't care what it is. Just get it done and be discreet. That'll cost you extra, the PI said. I don't care about the cost, Beatrice snapped. I care about results. My son's future is at stake. The recording ended. I sat there, staring at my computer screen, the sound of Beatrice's voice echoing in my ears. They weren't just planning to slander me. They were planning to frame me, to manufacture evidence, to force me into a post-nuptial agreement that would undoubtedly strip me of any and all rights. And the wedding toast, it was just the opening salvo, the first step in a campaign to paint me as a greedy, untrustworthy woman so that when their evidence appeared, everyone would believe it. I felt a terrifying calm settle over me. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound, but the shock was gone. The confusion was gone. All that was left was a diamond-hard certainty. I finally understood the full scope of their plan, and I had the proof. I had the emails. I had the financial documents they had illegally obtained, and I had a recording of Beatrice Davenport admitting to conspiracy to commit fraud. I saved everything. I made multiple copies, uploading them to a new secure cloud account and saving them to a physical drive. This was my ammunition. This was my leverage. Then I finally called Robert back. Ilara? He answered on the first ring, his voice filled with relief. Thank you for calling. Are you all right? No, Robert, I'm not, I said, my voice steady and cold. But I'm not calling for sympathy. I'm calling because you said there were things I needed to know. Before you say anything, I think there are things you need to know. There was a pause on his end. Go on, he said, his tone shifting from concern to serious. I know about the plan, I said simply. I know about the private investigator. I know about the intention to manufacture evidence to force me into a post-nuptial agreement. I know that my sister and your wife have been conspiring for months to destroy my reputation. And I have proof. Undeniable, unequivocal proof. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear his sharp intake of breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with a mixture of shock and resignation. I see, he said quietly. I had my suspicions that Beatrice was overstepping. I had no idea it had gone this far. An investigator? Manufacturing evidence? He sounded genuinely appalled. So when you say you have things I need to know, I continued, pressing my advantage, what you really mean is you want to know what I'm going to do with this information. Ilara, my wife has been difficult for a long time, he said, his voice weary. Her obsession with control, with the family's image and fortune, it has blinded her. But this is criminal. This goes beyond family drama. What do you want? I want a meeting, I said. You, me, Beatrice, Liam, and my sister Clara, and my parents. I want everyone in the same room. No lawyers present. Not at first. Just the family. We are going to have a conversation. When? He asked. Tomorrow night, I said. At your house. It's time for the truth to come out. All of it. We'll be there, he said without hesitation. And Ilara, I'm truly sorry for the part my family has played in this. I hung up the phone, my heart hammering in my chest. The first part of my plan was in motion. There would be no quiet annulment, no slinking away in shame. There would be a reckoning, and I would be the one to deliver it. The next 24 hours were a blur of nervous energy. I spoke to my lawyer again, outlining the proof I had found and the meeting I had arranged. She was impressed. You have them dead to rights, she said. Fraud, conspiracy, defamation. You hold all the cards, Alara. Decide what you want your victory to look like. I knew what I wanted. It wasn't money. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was accountability. I wanted them to face the consequences of their actions, not in a courtroom, but within the family they claimed to be protecting. I wanted their power, built on secrets and manipulation, to be dismantled in front of everyone. Liam tried to contact me dozens of times. Calls, texts, even an email. I ignored them all. There was nothing he could say that would change what he had done. His weakness had enabled this whole nightmare. He had made his bed, and now he was going to have to lie in it, right alongside his mother and my sister. My parents also called. My mother left a tearful voicemail, begging me to forgive Clara. "She's just jealous, honey," she said, her voice thick with misplaced sympathy. "She doesn't handle it well when you're happy. You know how she is? Don't let her ruin your marriage." Her words only strengthened my resolve. My mother had been enabling Clara's behavior our entire lives, always making excuses for her, always asking me to be the bigger person. That was over. The evening of the meeting, I dressed carefully. Not in a power suit or anything overtly aggressive, I chose a simple, elegant dress. I wanted to look calm, composed, and untouchable. I was not the victim in this story. I was the protagonist. I drove to the Davenports' mansion, the same place where we had celebrated our engagement just 6 months earlier. The memory felt like it belonged to another person's life. Back then, I had been nervous and eager to please, intimidated by the grandeur of the house and the cold formality of Beatrice. Tonight, I felt no fear, only a cold, clear purpose. Robert met me at the door, his face grim. "They're all in the living room," he said quietly. "Beatrice and Liam have no idea what this is truly about. They think it's a family intervention to save your marriage." "Good," I said. "Let them think that." I walked into the living room. It was a scene of surreal domestic tension. My parents were sitting stiffly on one of the silk sofas. Clara was next to them, looking sullen and defiant. Beatrice was perched in a high-backed armchair like a queen on her throne, looking imperious, and Liam was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, his face a mess of anxiety and hope. He looked up when I entered, a flicker of relief in his eyes. He thought I was here to reconcile. He had no idea what was coming. I took a seat in the armchair directly opposite Beatrice, forcing her to look at me. I placed my purse on the floor beside me. Inside it was the hard drive. My weapon. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice calm and even, cutting through the thick silence. "I know this is unusual, but after the events of the wedding, I felt it was important that we all talk, honestly, as a family." Beatrice sniffed disdainfully. "If this is about your sister's rather tasteless joke, Alara, I think you're being overly dramatic. It was a momentary lapse in judgment fueled by champagne." "A joke?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what you call a premeditated character assassination, Beatrice? Or was it just the opening remarks for your larger campaign?" Her eyes narrowed. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," I said, my voice hardening. I turned my attention to Clara. "And you, Clara, my maid of honor, tell me, when you were standing up there, calling me a gold digger, were those your words? Or were you just reading from a script that Beatrice wrote for you?" Clara flushed a deep, ugly red. "I don't have to answer that," she muttered, looking at our mother for support. I said what I said. "Yes, you did," I agreed, "and you're going to have to live with that." "But the why is what interests me. Was it just your own jealousy, or were there incentives involved? Did Beatrice promise you something for your loyalty? A little financial bonus for helping to manage the Alara problem?" The color drained from Clara's face. She shot a panicked look at Beatrice. I had hit a nerve. I turned to Liam, who had stopped pacing and was now staring at me, a look of dawning horror on his face. "And you, Liam," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, but only to make the blow land harder. "My husband, you stood there and said nothing. You froze. I've been thinking a lot about that. And I finally understand. You weren't shocked by the accusation. You were shocked that your mother and my sister had launched the public phase of their plan without telling you first. You were scared because you knew it was just the beginning and you had no idea what was coming next. Lara, that's not true, he stammered, his voice weak. I love you. I would never be part of a plan to hurt you. You already were, I said coldly. Your silence was your participation. Your secrecy was your complicity. You knew they were meeting. You knew they had concerns. You knew they were plotting against me. And you did nothing. You said nothing. You chose to protect them over protecting me. I let the accusation hang in the air, a toxic cloud filling the room. My parents looked horrified. Robert had his head in his hands. Beatrice and Clara were pale with shock. They hadn't expected this. They had expected tears and recriminations, not a cold, methodical dissection of their conspiracy. This is all baseless conjecture, Beatrice finally said, her voice regaining some of its steely composure. You are hysterical. It seems the stress of the wedding has gotten to you. Has it? I asked, a small, cold smile touching my lips. Then let's talk about something that isn't conjecture. Let's talk about the private investigator you hired to dig up dirt on me. Beatrice's composure cracked. A flicker of genuine fear appeared in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I reached into my purse and pulled out a small tablet. I had queued up the audio file. I think this might refresh your memory. I pressed play. The sound of Beatrice's voice filled the silent room, crisp and clear. Well, if you can't find anything, then you'll just have to create something. I need leverage, a doctored bank statement, a photograph that looks compromising. I don't care what it is. Just get it done. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room was on Beatrice. Her face was ashen, her mouth slightly agape. She looked like a statue, all her arrogance and condescension stripped away, leaving only the ugly truth of what she was. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father stared at Beatrice with open disgust. Clara looked like she was going to be physically ill. And Liam looked utterly destroyed. He sank into a chair, his face pale, his eyes fixed on his mother with a look of profound betrayal. Robert was the first to speak. He stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. He looked at his wife. Beatrice, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Is this true? Did you do this? Beatrice couldn't speak. She just stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. She couldn't understand how I had found out, how her carefully laid plans had been so completely and utterly exposed. I have everything, I said, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. The emails between you and Clara, the reports from the investigator, the invoices he sent to your personal account, Beatrice, the entire sordid plan from start to finish. I have it all. I looked around the room, meeting each of their gazes one by one. My parents, finally seeing their golden child for the malicious, petty person she truly was. Clara, cowering under the weight of her own treachery. Beatrice, her power and influence evaporating before her very eyes. And Liam, the man I had loved, now just a hollowed-out shell, a testament to the destructive power of his own weakness. So here is what is going to happen, I said, taking command of the room, of the situation, of my own life. First, this marriage is over. Liam, I will be filing for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. You will not contest it. You will sign whatever papers my lawyer puts in front of you. Liam looked up, his eyes pleading. Ilara, please, we can go to counseling. We can work through this. Don't do this. Work through this? I asked, my voice incredulous. There is no this to work through, Liam. There is no us. You broke your vows before we even left the church. You stood by and watched as your family prepared to destroy me. There is nothing left to save. He flinched as if I had struck him. And then he crumpled, burying his face in his hands. I felt a pang of something, a ghost of the love I had felt for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold fire of my resolve. Second, I continued, turning my gaze to Beatrice and Clara, you will both write a public apology, not just to me, but to every single guest who was at that wedding. You will post it on your social media accounts, and you will email it to the entire guest list. In it, you will state that the accusation made during the toast was a malicious lie born of jealousy and a desire to cause harm. You will retract it completely and unequivocally. You can't make us do that, Clara spat, finding a sliver of her old defiance. Oh, I can, I said, my voice like ice. Because my alternative is to release this recording and all the other evidence to the press. Socialite conspires to frame daughter-in-law. I wonder how that headline would look. Think of the scandal, Beatrice. Think of the damage to the precious Davenport family name. Think of the legal consequences. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony. I'm sure the district attorney would be very interested in this recording. Beatrice paled even further. Robert shot her a look of pure venom. The threat of public scandal and legal action was the one thing that could truly reach her. You will do it, Robert said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He was looking at his wife and at Clara. You will both do exactly as she says. And third, I said, delivering my final condition. I looked at Robert. Beatrice has proven that she cannot be trusted with the family's power or its money, her access to the family accounts, the trusts, the business. It needs to be severed, completely. She used your family's resources to try and destroy me. She cannot be allowed to have that power anymore. Robert nodded slowly, his expression grim. I agree. That is an internal matter, but I assure you, Alara, it will be handled. My wife's role in this family is about to be significantly redefined. Beatrice let out a small, strangled cry. For her, the loss of money and status was a fate worse than death. It was the ultimate punishment, and she knew it. I stood up. I had said everything I needed to say. I had laid out my terms. I had taken back my power. The room was silent, the air thick with the wreckage of their lives. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow with the annulment papers and the draft of the public apology, I said, walking toward the door. I expect your full cooperation. I paused at the doorway and looked back one last time. My mother was crying softly. My father was staring into the empty fireplace, his face etched with shame and disappointment. Clara was glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Beatrice looked like a broken doll, and Liam hadn't moved, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I felt a strange sense of emptiness. This was my victory. This was the justice I had sought. But it didn't feel triumphant. It just felt necessary. A painful, messy, but essential amputation. I had cut the poison out of my life. I walked out of the mansion and didn't look back. The cool night air felt clean, fresh. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, it didn't feel like there was a weight on my chest. It was over. The aftermath was swift and brutal, exactly as I had dictated. The next day, Liam signed the annulment papers without a word. He had them messengered over to my lawyer's office. There was a handwritten note attached, just 3 words. I am sorry. I read it and felt nothing. It was too little, far too late. The public apologies went out 2 days later. They were posted on Beatrice's and Clara's social media pages, and an email was sent to everyone on our wedding guest list. The text was exactly as my lawyer had drafted it. It was a humiliating, unequivocal retraction of the gold digger claim, admitting it was a malicious and calculated lie. The fallout in their social circle was immediate. Beatrice, a queen bee in her community, was suddenly persona non grata. Her friends, seeing her weakness and the public shame, abandoned her. Her invitations to charity boards and exclusive clubs were rescinded. Robert was true to his word. He had her name removed from the family trusts and cut off her access to any joint accounts. She was left with a small, personal allowance, enough to live on, but not enough to maintain the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. She was, in effect, a prisoner in her own gilded cage. Clara's punishment was, in some ways, even more severe. Her friends, who had always been drawn to her sharp wit and social climbing, were appalled by her public confession of cruelty. She was ostracized. The apology email had been sent to our extended family as well, and the condemnation from aunts, uncles, and cousins was swift. My parents, finally forced to confront the reality of their daughter's character, were devastated. Their relationship with Clara became strained and distant. She had always craved their approval, their belief that she was the special one. She had lost that forever. I had a final, stilted conversation with my mother a week later. She called me, her voice hesitant. "Alara, are you doing okay?" "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice neutral. "I'm moving on." "Your father and I, we're so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. We always made excuses for her. We failed you. We failed you as parents." "Yes, you did," I said, not out of anger, but out of a need for the truth to finally be spoken. "You always asked me to be the smaller person to accommodate her ego. You taught her that there were no consequences for her actions. Well, now there are." There was a long silence. "I know," she whispered. "I hope one day you can forgive us." "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "But I'm not going to carry this anger around with me. I'm letting it go. I'm letting all of you go." It was the healthiest thing I could do for myself. I needed a clean break from the toxic dynamic that had defined my family for so long. A few weeks after the annulment was finalized, I got a call from Robert. He wanted to meet. I was hesitant, but I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop. "I wanted to thank you," he said, which surprised me. "You did what I should have done years ago. You stood up to Beatrice. You held her accountable. Our family, it was sick, rotted from the inside by her need for control. You exposed the sickness, and now maybe we can start to heal." He explained that he and Beatrice were in counseling, but the future of their marriage was uncertain. He had taken full control of the family business, and Liam, humbled and broken by the experience, was starting from the bottom, trying to earn back his father's respect. "He loved you, you know," Robert said quietly. "In his own weak, flawed way. He just loved his mother's approval more. He made a terrible choice." "Yes, he did," I agreed. "It's a choice he can't undo." Before we left, Robert slid a folder across the table. "This is from me," he said. "Not from the family, not as a settlement, but as a personal apology and a token of respect. It's the full invoice from the private investigator. I've already paid it. But I also included a check for the same amount, made out to you, for the pain and suffering my family caused. Please, accept it." I looked at the check. It was for a substantial amount of money. The irony was almost laughable. The very thing they had accused me of wanting was now being freely offered to me as an apology. I thought about it for a moment. Taking it felt wrong, but refusing it also felt wrong, like I was letting them off too easily. Then I had an idea. "Thank you, Robert," I said, taking the check. "I will accept this." The next day, I donated the entire amount to a local charity that supports women escaping abusive situations. I sent a copy of the donation receipt to Robert with a simple note. "Let's hope this does some good in the world." Life slowly returned to a new normal. I kept my apartment. I threw myself back into my career, and I found a new sense of purpose and confidence. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable, and I had not only survived, but I had triumphed. I had done it by being smart, by being strong, and by refusing to be a victim. Months later, I was having dinner with Maya. We were laughing about something silly when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I glanced at it. "I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. But I just wanted you to know that I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I was so afraid to stand up to my mother. I know it doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know I'm trying to be a better man. Because of you. Liam." I read the text and felt a flicker of something. Not love, not forgiveness, but a distant, detached pity. He was on his own journey now, one that no longer had anything to do with me. I deleted the message without replying. My life was my own now, free from the shadows of the Davenports and the toxicity of my own family. I had learned a hard lesson about trust and betrayal, but I had also learned about my own strength. They had tried to label me, to put me in a box, to define me by their own greed and fear. They thought they knew what a gold digger was. They thought they could make me into one. But in the end, I had shown them something else entirely. I had shown them what a woman who knew her own worth looked like. And that was a victory that no amount of money could ever buy. The final, lingering thought was not one of sadness or anger, but of a quiet, powerful peace. They had tried to make me small, but in the end, they were the ones who had been diminished. I was free.